Hi, this is Anil Bhartia, and welcome to another edition of Weekly Wrap with Mike. It's another week. This week was not as exciting as I was thinking it would be, except other than the fact that Apple had their first worldwide developer conference online, and they made some really interesting announcements. I will talk about that later. I want to hand over the mic to Mike, and to see what stories you have picked there.
Yeah, there were a couple that really started to pop this week. Tom Krasik's Protocol Cloud had covered the what I think was the big news in cloud this week. AWS launched Honeycode, a no-code development tool. And while it likely won't matter much to large enterprises with millions of dollars in their app dev budgets, it's likely a step towards greater cloud adoption. I think it's going to be interesting.
But the story that I was interested in, because I am heavily into AR, VR, and AI, ML. But the problem is, this is still at very early phase. Our good friend Sam Chattington, he runs an awesome podcast, Trimmel, where he's talking to researchers and all the work that is going on. But I'm interested in more where we see it in real world, practical. And there's one company that can actually make it happen, which is Apple. They have made a lot of technologies, mainstream or accessible. So, and the beauty with Apple is that if you look at them, it really doesn't matter who invented it first. What really matters is who made it usable and mainstream. And Apple is now going to make AI and ML mainstream. The Verge reports that instead of making big promises, air power, Apple Apple adopted a smarter and quieter approach at its WWC event. The company sprinkled the event with subtle mentions of more AI coming into our lives without compromising on privacy, as we see in the case of Google. The number one is that facial recognition for HomeKit. Now, this is interesting. We have seen Ring doorbells. What HomeKit is going to do is that it will enable smart cameras to use photos you have tagged on your phone to identify who is at your door and even announce that, hey, Jen is home or XYZ is home. That is incredible. They will tell you who is home. Now, I know you will have some worries about privacy, we'll talk about later. With Apple Watch, they are going to track sleeping. They're going to use machine learning to classify your movements and detect when you're sleeping. And they will use the same mechanism to allow Apple Watch to track new activities like dancing and hand washing. Well, in case of COVID-19, yes, hand washing is something good. And if they can remind you every single time that, hey, wash your hands, that would be good. Another thing is, which is more or less like I would need, because I travel a lot, and that is a translation app. We have seen it with Google Translate, but what Apple is doing, it detects the language being spoken, and it will translate and can even do live translation of conversations. So that when you're talking to somebody from a totally different, culture, language, it will translate it for you. Now, when you look at all of that, you will be worried that, hey, what happens to privacy? Because tracking your face, tagging your face, and putting it on their server, it leads to a lot of privacy issues. But the beauty with Apple is that, unlike Google or Ring, they're not putting anything on the cloud. All of the data remains on the device, and all the AI ML processing will also happen at the device level. So I'm actually looking forward to iOS 14, which should be out, I think, next month for public beta.
Yeah, I thought I saw somebody in my Twitter feed today that they've got the beta running and it's actually stable. Although they did qualify that with, more stable than iOS 13, which isn't saying a whole lot. The but the thing with Apple and with where we're going with AR and with machine learning is a lot of this started, a lot of the real applications and the test grounds for AR were in the enterprise. There's in my town, there's this great development shop run by my friend Dead Anson, that has done amazing work on this. And you mentioned you mentioned hand washing. Well, that and I were talking the other day. They've years, I think it was about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, had an AR app that would show you where you washed your hands. And you think, oh well, that's a pretty boring and useless app, until you realize that in a hospital situation, or an hospital environment, what that does is, uh, unsanitary hands just from hand washing could be millions of dollars in losses. So now we've got Apple, and Apple does one thing really, really well. They take technologies that have been around and they bring them to market, to mass market. They don't always have to be first, right? They just have to make it so that everybody can use it. I think that's one of the most exciting things coming out right now about the new iOS, is that we're going to see this is a whole nother round of innovation that we haven't seen, that we haven't really had available to us as consumers or as business people. And that gets exciting. Nobody knows really exactly what that's going to look like, and what's on the horizon. The best that we've had at this point are our Pokemon games. Really, right? Another topic that seemed to be pretty hot last week was cloud migration, and I don't know what sparked it, but something is up, because there were a number of stories that hit focused on migrating to the cloud, or migrating from clouds to cloud. In that same O'Reilly, that same O'Reilly story. I think it was something like 49% of the organizations were running applications in traditional on-premises context, and I got on-premises right. So I know there are a number of people in my Twitter feed and the Clouderati that will be happy that I actually got the correct wording there. And 39% were using a combo of public and private cloud deployments in a hybrid cloud model. I think it was 54% using multi-cloud, I think I said. One of the things that they cited the most was security, was one of the reasons for one of the skill areas, and followed by monitoring, and then the thing that everybody loves, Kubernetes.
When we look at this, I just like quick, thought there that I think in post COVID-19 or during COVID-19 crisis, only those companies are surviving and succeeding who already had some kind of cloud strategy in place. People used to say digital transformation. I used to say, the strategy should be cloud. Digital transformation is okay, but you should have your workload running on cloud so that you are not dependent on a data center where you may not be able to send your engineer, where you cannot even procure hardware because supply chain is totally disrupted. Though, of course, it will disrupt the cloud also, but cloud vendors I have better resources to reach out there. So it suddenly, I think strategies have not changed, but things have been accelerated now. So I think if they do another report during the COVID-19, they will see that the numbers will be way over. Everybody is rushing to move and migrate to the cloud. That creates a lot of opportunity for industry, but that also is going to lead to another big problem, which is security. Because once you run everything in your corporate firewall, which is monitored all the time, suddenly you are running in the cloud. Your employees are accessing everything from the laptop, from the desktop, for their iPads. It's hard to control. Even if you have VPN, maybe they will use VPN to also conduct personal business, which means they don't have any privacy. So the next report is related to security, which is interestingly, I found it kind of strange because security is something that I cover, and Snyk, their report finds that there is a decline in open source vulnerabilities. If Snyk is one of the leading security vendors in the cloud space, and their report says that the number of new vulnerabilities discovered in open source software packages has declined 20% on year-over-year basis. That's kind of strange and kind of contradicts the two studies that we covered earlier. One was the recent one, and we recorded discussion with Polyverse, and that report finds that actually it's going up. It's going to hit the same numbers that were there way back in 2017. That it's going up to 79%. Um, so it's kind of, I mean, we always take any surveys with a grain of salt, but it's kind of interesting to see the conflicting surveys, because one fact is that the adoption of open source is increasing. There is more analysis being done, so that's why, just like Donald Trump says that more testing means more cases. So that is why we hear about more vulnerabilities found. But one thing that all these studies agreed upon was, and this is something really disturbing, that the majority of the vulnerabilities that are being discovered are considered to be high severity. That is really critical, because we cannot forget facts. So I think industry will have to do something about it, because things are changing. DevSecOps is there. Security is kind of becoming a priority for developer, which used to be an afterthought. Linux Foundation and Harvard, they ran a survey last week, because the problem with the open source is that it's distributed. There's no like App Store or Microsoft Store where somebody vets it and controls it. It's distributed, so developers are writing the code and you're getting it from their sources. Plus, because of the license, anybody can take it, modify it, and redistribute it further. So there's no mechanism to track it all. So they're running a survey for developers so that they can understand what is going on. So the survey is still up till August. If you're an open source developer, you should certainly go there and check that out.
ZDNet and Information Week, reported on an O'Reilly study that found that 25% of IT managers predict that their companies plan to move all their applications to the cloud within the next year. I don't think to me, that's not a huge surprise. We're seeing that, across the board and across geographies. But the survey was conducted pre-COVID, so that's. Right. We know that it was happening after all of this happened, and it accelerated, and everybody was rapidly just scrambling to get stuff, to move workloads to the cloud and to adapt to this new environment. But the fact that this study was done before all of this hit shows that there's still a lot of pent up demand and still a lot of room for moving the cloud. Some of the other stuff that I found in that O'Reilly found was more than 9 in 10 organizations expect to increase their usage of cloud-based infrastructure. And what I found interesting was that little more than half, I think it was 54%, plan to use multiple cloud providers. So that's kind of interesting and something that I've seen starting to pop up this week. There have been two different topics in the cloud space that have been hot. One has been multi-cloud. The other has been cloud migration. In that same O'Reilly study, in both Information Week and in ZDNet, they talked about organizations planning to migrate the majority of their apps to the cloud over the next year. I think it was something like 54%, plan to use multiple cloud providers.
Google has released a new application programming interface for Android that will allow developers to create more realistic looking and functional augmented reality applications. It's called AR Core Depth API, which will be available to every Android developers out there. And what it does, it uses the phone's rear camera to capture a real world environment and then insert virtual content into that environment. I think that the AR war is just heating up. Once again, I'll bring Apple here because they again have an edge. Because if you look at the new iPad Pro, it has a LiDAR sensor there. It's an actual laser sensor which scans your environment precisely like a military grade sensor. And they already have ARKit 4 out there for a while. So it's going to be a very interesting word. And the end users are going to benefit from it. The only player that I'm missing in this space is Microsoft, because they are doing some incredible work with HoloLens. HoloLens is very expensive. I mean, an average user cannot afford it at this moment, but I'm looking forward to what's going on in the AR and VR space.
You're pretty astute when you're talking about Microsoft there and HoloLens, because one of the when you got something that expensive, one of the areas that starts to play really big is where AR has been doing a lot of heavy lifting already and have been very innovative, is in the industrial space. So when we tend to think of AR primarily as a fun consumer thing to do, and the reality is a lot of early work and a lot of value for AR has come through enterprise engagements. That is, for a lot of our audience here is where a lot of the excitement is. It's still back down in the plumbing. It's the heavy lifting. It's not a game. It's how do I make things work? Apple and Google have that right. They have the handsets right there. They're ready to go. They are going to open this up to a lot more people, to a lot more applications. Some of them are going to be fun. Some of them are going to be things that are just, that we haven't thought of yet. And when I look at my, I pick up my iPhone and it's got a ruler on it, right? That I can shine around the room and figure out how far things are, or a level. That's as rudimentary as AR can get, but it's there. So now Apple and Google are going to extend that even further, right? It's going to get a lot more exciting. And I think you're right, because it's not just what happens on the device. It's processing power that happens up in the cloud. It's processing power that happens on the device. It's an incredible amount of additional data and bandwidth and all of the real unsexy stuff of technology that makes all of that happen behind the scenes, and that is really exciting. And we haven't had anything really exciting in technology to especially from the likes of Apple, where lately the best innovation has been for the past year or two, the best innovation has been a different color iPhone. So this gets to be. This is Apple becoming, getting back to being what Apple was, and should be fun to watch.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Mike. And once again, thank you so much for taking your time out and talking to us today. And thanks to our viewers as well for sitting here and watching us. We'll see you again next week. Thank you.